Welcome to the Connected Leaders Academy virtual conference designed to reshape your vision of transformation. As we navigate the evolving business landscape, our speakers will unveil innovative strategies to manage and initiate change. Prepare to adapt, innovate, and lead, ensuring your role in this transformative era.
I cannot congratulate each of you enough to taking time out of your day and to view or read what we've put forth today. Congratulations on making an impact, making your life better, and this is so great to be a part of this group. Have you ever heard a speaker speak and you're in awe? You're blown away by how effortless and smooth and how cool they look, and you're just so taken back emotionally and motivated and engaged. But then conversely, you hear the other, somebody who rambles on incoherently, can't piece two sentences together, ums and ahs and oohs, just no rhyme or reason, no method really to their madness. And you think, oh my gosh. But wait, you say, Scott, but you don't know. You don't know how nervous and anxious I get when I present. Oh, I do. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So the title of my conversation today is The Courage to Be Real. It's really about driving authenticity. And I have just a journey and a path that I want to share with you and give you some actionable steps. And some of you might think, well, I'm already a really gifted speaker. I still hope that you can take away something from our conversation today. So can't thank you enough for being part of our journey. I think you can really understand a lot about somebody by understanding who they are and where they're from. So I'm a Midwesterner through and through, born and raised, small town Indiana, Crawfordsville, Indiana to be exact. Small town Indiana, known for basketball, corn, and racing cars, and boy bands. Shout out to the OG Jackson 5, Gary, Indiana. Not necessarily a small town, but Gary, Indiana nonetheless. But there was also a boy band that not too many people knew about unless you're from Crawfordsville, Indiana, and that was the Ramey Boys, the band I was a part of. Now, the only difference being one of four boys and member of the Ramey Boys is that there was absolutely no harmony, and I mean zero, literally and figuratively, fought tooth and nail all day long, every day. And God bless my parents' souls because it was a difficult place to be raised in a good and maybe in a less productive way. I love the fact that each boy band, every one of the performers has a name. So let me give you a rundown of our crew. We had Brian. He was the black sheep. Brian drove an AMG Gremlin. I worked at Long John Silver's. My favorite story about Brian is one night he decides he wants to run away from home because he just wasn't getting along with any of us brothers. Packs everything up he has in a black trash bag, slides through the window, and gets as far as my grandmother's house, which is about 2 miles away. She calls like, "Hey, do you guys know Brian's gone?" Brian's a character, was then, is today. He's one of my favorite people in the world. The funniest thing about the story really is that we had the Anderson windows that opened about 45 degrees. And so I don't know how he got through the window. Then there was Rob, who's a tough guy, ironically, a superintendent of a school district in Indiana today. Rob was rough and tumbling and just gnarly. He seemed like he was always angry. He really wasn't. He's got the heart of gold, but he really felt like that. And then John, our youngest brother, we call him Preppy, always a logo, designer logo. That's John. And to this day, he still very much follows that mold. I guess you could call me sporty. We'll get to that in a second. My dad, his nickname was Blazer. Blazer was named Blazer. His real name was Mark. He was named Blazer because come rain, sleet, snow, he was getting to his job in Indianapolis, which was about an hour away, in his Ford Pinto. Now that I think about it, having two kids myself, I'm like, what genius it was to have a car with four boys, but only could take two at a time. Blazer was notorious for never stopping on car rides. I think it was something that happened in the 80s with parents and dads, the driving school, I guess, that they would attend that just said you can't stop no matter what. So trips to Florida from Indiana to Colorado, we literally never stopped. So that was Blazer. And then there was Becky, my mom. My mom, best way I could characterize and summarize who she is and who she was is that she had Brian when she was 16 years of age. She had 35 foster kids at one point or another come through our house. She was as loyal as the day is long and tough. The joke amongst us boys was that you never wanted to get Becky on the horn. So if somebody crossed us, Ramey boys, Becky would pick up the phone. You didn't want that telephone call, and you certainly didn't want to be on the other end of that call. I had a great childhood. As you might imagine, I felt invincible, frankly. When you're raised with such a supportive group of people who are so loyal to you, you feel invincible. My mom had one rule. If one of us came home bloody, we better all come home bloody. And that only happened once. Rob got into a scruff. I know you're surprised to hear that based upon my description. I was a two-sport athlete, all-state football. I was recruited for both football and basketball to play Division I sports. I ended up signing a national letter of intent. I was the first high school student out of my high school to play a Division I sport. I signed a national letter of intent with George Washington Universities, and sure enough, 2 days before the national letter of intent day, I made a commitment. The coaches were fired. I followed an assistant coach to Niagara. I'd never been to Niagara, never heard of Niagara, but it's on Niagara in Niagara Falls, on the overlooking the river. Followed him to Niagara. Started the first 4 games of my freshman year, and we were scheduled to play St. John's University, Malik Sealy on the weekend, and I broke my foot on a Tuesday before that game. I was going to guard Malik, future NBA player. The summer of my freshman year, I dislocated my shoulder. As you would imagine, when you're banged up as much as I was, you got to know the trainer really well, and Ray Kiss was a gem. Ray Kiss was New York through and through, slick back, black hair, Pat Riley looking guy, tough New Yorker, mob tough. But he had a heart of gold and he cared about us immensely, and Ray and I became really, really close. But what also happened during that time was my mom and dad got a divorce. I'm telling you folks, like our family was viewed as the perfect family. We were far from perfect, but we were viewed as the perfect family, and it rocked us to the core. All of my brothers, all of us, it rocked us to the core. So as you might imagine, being injured, I've subsequently broken my foot 4 more times. I had surgery twice, was on crutches 18 to 24 months. It was time to hang up the shoes. The thing about being injured when you're an athlete is you're connected, but you're disconnected. You're a part of the team, but you're a part. You feel isolated, not intentionally, you just do. I guess maybe it's the competitive nature of how people act. It's certainly how I reacted. So as my kids say, it's time for me to become a NARP, a non-athletic regular person, and go to just to be a student. So I decided to transfer. I'll never forget the cold, crisp air walking across Niagara University's campus to the Gallagher Center where we played and practiced, where the coach's office and Ray's office were. Every step you would take, you would sink. You could hear the sound crackling of the ground underneath you. And I'll never forget that walk. I was going over to tell the coaches that I was leaving. I was going to transfer. And who do I see at the top of the steps in the Gallagher Center but Ray Kist? He's like, "What's up, Scott?" I hear rumblings. I said, "Ray," and all of a sudden it hit me. My face started getting red. My heart started palpitating. I went into a tunnel vision. Legs were shaky. My whole body felt like it was going to crumble into a massing heap of sweat. At the time I had bangs, so imagine I was sweating so profusely, the hair was stuck to my forehead. And so it began. That was my first panic attack at 19 years of age. That moment, my lack of confidence spoke volumes. Never, ever in my wildest dreams would I have thought that an invincible kid that had everything going for him would find himself in that position. I can tell you that with all sincerity to this day. And as you can tell, I remember it very vividly. Winston Churchill referred to depression as my black dog. It was always there, always would come back. Very loyal. For me, my anxiety was my shadow, always lingering, mocking me, always lurking, waiting to show up in the right conditions. I happen to be in Jacksonville, Florida, not far from Mayo Clinic, and I'm going to read you what Mayo says about panic attacks. Panic attacks is a sudden onset of intense fear that triggers severe reactions. No real danger or apparent cause. Panic attacks feel very frightening. They go on to list the symptoms: impending doom or danger, fear of loss or death, rapid pounding heart rate, sweating, trembling, shaking, shortness of breath, chills, hot flashes, goes on and on and on, and it gets worse. They go on to say that one of the worst things, I can tell you this from experience, one of the worst things about having a panic attack is the fear of having another and another and another. So being the overachiever, I had every single symptom that Mayo Clinic lists, and I had them for quite some time. And thank goodness I've been working on myself and working to get better. And I guess, age, now at 52 years of age and not 19 years old, you get a bit more wisdom about how to handle things like this. But it was a transformational part of my life. And I'm on a mission to help others who have similar concerns or angst get past them so they can prosper as I did within corporate America and now as an entrepreneur. So I decided to leave Niagara. I did ultimately get out the conversation, was able to share with Ray and then subsequently with all the coaches because they're right next to each other, their offices. And I was able to share with them I was transferred to John Carroll University. Best decision of my life. See, I had aspirations at the time to be an attorney. I wanted to be a lawyer, a litigator. And so I met an angel, and her name was Joan Hill. Joan worked at the outplacement office for internships at John Carroll. I'll never forget her and her husband, Jim, and I'll get to him in a second. I had the privilege to spend some time with Joan, and I told her my aspirations, and she connected me with the #1 litigator in Cleveland and Northern Ohio. Couldn't wait to call him. I got him on the phone. First thing he says to me, you don't want to be an attorney. It's miserable. Think about doing something else. So I go back to Joan with my tail between my legs, thinking about, well, that was my goal, my aspirations. Heck, at one point, just to put it in perspective, I was like, I want to be a Supreme Court justice when I was in high school. Think about that, the confidence I had. Joan's like, well, that's too bad. Have you ever thought about becoming a financial advisor? Have you ever considered financial services? See, my husband, Jim, just left a CFO role in a company in the upper Midwest outside of Cleveland. And he's now at McDonald Company Securities and wants to be a financial advisor. And he's looking for someone, a young, ambitious, hungry kid to help him. So I don't know much about it, but I went and met with him. And so began 31 years until this past May, just months ago, a 31-year career in financial services that took me to the ranks of executive vice president of a Fortune 500 company. Now, in the early 90s, those of you that grew up when I grew up, you remember you would see questions like, or commercials, like never let them see you sweat. Leaders never show weakness. No, leaders don't show vulnerability. We show tough. You can't get to know your people. How can you lead and manage them if you become friends with them or if you're collegial with them? You know about them, they know about you. You can't do that. But what also wasn't discussed in the early 90s is anxiety and mental health, in particular for men. Never discussed, frankly, until recently, around COVID. So I dug in. I'm a learner. I was a researcher, a history major, so I dug in. And what I found, the statistics are staggering. 70% of employed Americans believe those who give presentations agree that presentations can help change the success of their career. The International Association of Business Communication found that 60% of leaders experience significant anxiety and communicate with their employees and stakeholders. 60%. Now, for entrepreneurs, it doesn't get any better, folks. 39% of entrepreneurs surveyed admitted to avoiding or postponing promotional activities due to fear. Harvard Business Review says 67% of entrepreneurs say that improving their communication skill would, in fact, impact their business. And maybe the most disappointing thing at all, and I see it now as an entrepreneur, 58% of entrepreneurs say they will miss out on networking and speaking opportunities due to fear. I didn't have an outlet then. This wasn't widely discussed. I didn't understand the problem like I do today. I didn't know where to go. But what I did know and what I've learned since then is the concept called success reluctance. And the idea is that what got us here won't get us any further. That like we're tethered, we'll get to the end of the tether and it'll pull us back. We'll start to break through, we get pulled back. And in some way, shape, or form, perhaps my shadow anxiety was part of my success reluctance characteristics. But I can tell you right now, as an entrepreneur, I had to confront them head on because I had to start self-promoting myself. I developed what I call the SPEAK framework. I help anxious presenters conquer their fear. SPEAK, an acronym, stands for, the S stands for style. I think it's important for us to really define what our unique style is. The P is for presence. The greatest gift we can give our audience is to be in the moment, to be present, to be connected with them. You want to influence somebody? Show them you care by being in the moment with them. Empathy is for understanding your audience. I mean, truly understanding your audience. Don't bring in your considerations. Understand who you're chatting with and tailor your comments specifically to them. And then K is for knowledge. All this information that we have in our heads that we tend to want to share with everybody at once, we have to show discretion and edit based upon who our audience is. So given the time we have today, I'm only going to focus on authenticity. I think it's really, really important. And I hope you'll agree after we get through our little conversation here, that it will change the way you communicate going forward. So let's jump in. I had a manager reach out to me recently, somebody I know really, really well. First thing he says to me is, I don't have anxiety. My wife does. Like, thank you. Then why are we chatting? I know him well. I've worked with him. I've watched him just skyrocket through corporate America. And I mean skyrocket through corporate America. The guy has it. And we all know what it is. You know it when you see it. You feel it. You understand it. He has it. Unlimited potential. By the way, not like everyone in this meeting and listening to this conversation. We all have unlimited potential. This individual has it on a multiple. He said, Scott, I have a real challenge. I have trouble getting into my presentation. Once I'm there, I'm great. I'm comfortable. I'm excited. I'm engaged. I get great feedback, but I can't get through the opening. So I probed a little bit. And then what happened next blew my mind. He started talking about his desire to be a leader and, really does he want to lead? And maybe it's time to go back to an individual contributor. And I said, tell me where this is coming from. And folks, he goes into a story about growing up in Nicaragua and fleeing Nicaragua in the early 80s with his family. They sold everything they owned. One of 6 in his family literally took $100,000 cash and concealed it and strapped it to every single person in the family and made their way north for political asylum to California. They got arrested in Mexico. He finds himself in a Mexican prison at the age of 4. Finally, they make their way and settle right on the border in LA outside Compton and saw things there that I'm not even going to begin to go into in this conversation. And I just looked at him after he got done, and it was a very emotional conversation. And I just looked at him and I said, you just wrote your next opening. You just wrote your next opening. He said, I could never. I said, why not? He said, see, in my culture, we're taught, provide a service, do great work, get paid, move on to the next. Provide a service, do great work, get paid, move on to the next. And in knowing him the way I know him and observing the way I've observed him as he's moved through his career, and I said, and guess what? That's how you've decided to lead. Transactional. And he just went white, just stark white. He said, yeah, you're right. So if you hear anything and you take away anything from my conversation with you today, is hear this. Vulnerability transforms strangers into allies and stories into shared experiences. You want the cheat code of connection, a real authentic connection? It is vulnerability. But I'm going to go a step further and give you what I call the 4 pillars to authentic connection. The first is affinity. It's the foundation. Affinity is a natural sense of connection or likeness that we feel towards somebody. And you all know, like immediately you meet that person, like, I really like that person. I could hang out with them. Wow, they've got great energy. It's about shared values and interests and goals, and there's alignment, and you do so in many instances, you can almost do so effortlessly when you meet somebody new. The beautiful thing about affinity is you're most likely to be trusted, more likely to be trusted, engaging in a stronger and better, more practical relationships and more productive relationships. So affinity is the foundation. The second is communication. Communication is the key to understanding. The tools in which we express our ideas, solve problems, create shared understanding. And it has to vary with everyone we interact with. We all know this to be true, but this is a reminder. Clarity in communication reduces confusion, fosters alignment, enables better and more effective decision-making. Affinity, communication. The third is shared experiences. This is the glue, literally the glue that bonds you to somebody else. And you all know what I'm talking about. You see it in sport all the time. but specifically there are events and challenges and victories that will unite all of us. That you do something with someone and you say, wow, that was a great experience. Shared visions, shared goals. And lastly, as I think most importantly, vulnerability. Folks, this is the gasoline. It's the fuel. It's the spark. It's the igniter. It's absolutely necessary for authentic communication. Showing your true self, including your fears, your shortcomings, your mistakes, your flaws, all your warts, so to speak. It's so important to have a humanity and a soul and trust with people. It breaks down oxytocin. If you don't believe me, try to be grateful and angry at the same time. But specifically, oxytocin is generated when you share a story that has vulnerability a part of it. That you reveal your true identity, yourself, and you demonstrate vulnerability in storytelling, you release oxytocin. Your audience in turn will also release oxytocin. Now, the thing about nerves, if you're nervous about when you speak, cortisol is released. Oxytocin and cortisol can't exist simultaneously, folks. There's science to this. I went so far to reach out to Dr. Sue Miller at Indiana University, who's the expert on human connection. Look her up. Research after research after research. And I said, Dr. Sue, here's my hypothesis. If I'm in an audience with complete strangers and I tell a story of vulnerability that includes vulnerability, will I release oxytocin? And in turn, does the audience release oxytocin? And she says, absolutely, you're on the right path. It's the cheat code, folks, to human connection. So where do you start? Set a timer. Write down all these personal experiences, your mistakes, your failures, your flaws, your tragedies, your triumphs, and just choose 3 to have on the shelf. And when you're engaging in conversations with prospects or clients, and you want to build authentic connection, share one of those stories with them. Now, as I move towards the wrap, I do want to just let you all know that I have on my website, www.thescottramey.com, or if you want to use the Queen's English, a confidence assessment. If you wonder where you stand on the spectrum, check it out. I hope you find it useful. So to close, I have 2 daughters, Aubrey and Sasha. They're 22 and 21. Aubrey played Division I soccer, Sasha Division I swimmer. Aubrey's going through a really, really difficult time, and I'm going to rush this because I want you to get to the point here. But Aubrey's going through a really, really difficult time. She was benched, made some mistakes on the field, was benched, was seen a sports psychologist. They recommended antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. She received a D in her most recent speech class. And I called her one day, and I knew the only thing, because keep in mind, no one else knew that I had anxiety but my wife, Michelle. This was 2 years ago, folks. I knew the only thing that was going to help her get past her anxiety and realize that she's not broken and she's not flawed was to tell her that I had anxiety. And I did. She was in tears. I was in tears. And she said, Dad, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. So when it's no longer about you, the pressure is no longer on you. And let's talk about you for just a second. You're all heroes. You all are uniquely qualified. What you do every single day is absolutely spectacular. You impact lives. What I want to leave you with is just one thing. Do not overload their minds. Target their hearts. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for participating in today's enlightening session. As we transition to our next expert, remember that each strategy and insight is a step toward becoming a transformative leader in your field. Visit connectedleadersacademy.com to stay engaged and informed. The journey of change is ongoing. Let's move forward together.